instantly, I noticed this Hulk is very green.
He's so green.
Uncomfortably green.
Like fluorescent green.
Like hella green. One shade, ripe avocado, green.
Like the inside of an avocado.
Like a green screen. Like a jolly green giant.
Yeah.
He's an angry green giant.
It's so green. I don't even have a comparison for it. I just need everyone at home to believe me when I say he's so fucking green.
Welcome in, everybody. Bienvenue, Noodle Gang. It's another Just Play It podcast with your hosts. I am James.
And I'm Nick.
And we are diving into another early 2000s classic. Unless you wouldn't consider this a classic.
I in no way, shape, or form consider this a classic.
Right out the gates, Nick is not digging this one. This week we reviewed Ang Lee's Hulk from Universal Pictures. Nick, we kind of were talking a little bit before this recording, before we actually jumped into the studio. Seems like you have a lot of hot takes to make about this movie.
I do. I'm going to get into that a little bit later. So this was, a lot of people know Marvel today. The Marvel properties that are produced by Marvel Studios. Obviously your Iron Mans, your Captain Americas, your Thors, even your Ant-Man's, Guardians of the Galaxy, right? These great films that are done really well, that have great direction, great production. But people don't remember that before Iron Man in 2008, Marvel properties were in a very bad place. So this is not Marvel Studios. This is Universal Pictures. I'm just letting everybody know off the rip here. This is going to be an adventure. Coming off of last week's serious tone of Schindler's List, this is going to be the opposite.
This is going to be a walk in the park compared to that.
Yeah. So give us a little more background on the movie, James.
Like you said, we are all familiar with the MCU and its major success and popularity today, which is why we are starting a new series called the NCU. That's right, you heard it correctly. Not MCU, the NCU, as in not so Marvel Cinematic Universe. We'll be diving into the unpopular, forgotten, trouble child properties of Marvel's Christmas past. And the ones that are not integrated into the main storyline, the main timeline, and have, for the most part, been forgotten. So like you said, this is pre-MCU. This is pre-Iron Man. Marvel was not in a good spot. They were dodging bankruptcy in the 80s and 90s. They sold off the Hulk property to Universal. They sold Spider-Man and Venom off to Sony. X-Men, Fantastic Four to 20th Century Fox. Marvel was all over the place. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, nobody wanted those characters. No studio wanted to adopt those characters or buy the rights. And you were saying because it might have been a hard project to pull off?
In my opinion, I think it would be. Iron Man, as we know, when it's done well, took a lot of effort, but at the same time, there was a huge payoff. And I don't think superhero movies really had a place in the world early on, right there in that time frame, the early to mid 2000s. It wasn't until Marvel really kicked it off and threw some money behind it. Even the Christopher Nolan Batman series, right? When we started saying, hey, these comic book characters can be really cool.
Right. Until Jon Favreau joined the mix, Marvel was in hit or miss shape, because this is one of those misses. Back in the early 2000s, you had Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, you had the X-Men movies, which both were considered pretty successful as far as how they were reviewed by the critics and definitely in the box office.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that kind of missed were Fantastic Four.
Oof.
Definitely Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer, which I believe is on the list because I haven't seen that one. And Hulk. These were the two early 2000s ones that were not quite there. They were misses.
I might throw the original X-Men trilogy in there. The only good thing that came out of that was the Wolverine spinoff there with Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman became the Wolverine big time.
He's done like 9 movies where he plays Logan, Wolverine.
He has, but like X2, X-Men: The Last Stand, not great.
I think X2 is pretty good. I'm trying to remember. No, I liked X2. It was X-Men 3: The Last Stand that kind of was. They had way too much storylines going on.
That seemed to be a theme with a lot of the early Marvel properties, but enough about that. Maybe one day we'll get into the whole.
Oh, and that's what I'm setting up here, Nick. We are kicking off this whole NCU series with this movie, 2003's Hulk. Not the Hulk or the Incredible Hulk, simply Hulk. This movie's directed by Ang Lee. Weirdly enough, he has a very eclectic group of movies he's directed, which he is known for. They include Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Life of Pi, which he won an Oscar for, Best Directing, and Brokeback Mountain, and Hulk.
That's quite a resume.
Looks quite the charcuterie board there of movies. This movie stars Eric Bana. He plays Bruce Banner and title character Hulk. Jennifer Connelly, Nick Nolte, and Sam Elliott. This had a budget of $137 million. And worldwide, it grossed $245 million. So, box office success. It did only take in 132 domestically. So, without the foreign box office numbers, this would have technically lost some money. And we're going to get into it about why.
Yeah, I'll just say this off the rip is I feel like a lot of that gross, even domestically, because if you view this through today's lens, it's clearly not to the standard of the Marvel studio. But I think a lot of people were, again, excited about these superhero films coming back into the zeitgeist, that there was a lot of excitement around this.
There was, and I believe that's why there's a strong audience reaction, which we will reveal at the end when we get into our ratings. So this is from 2003. It's got its 20-year anniversary coming up this year. This premiered in June of 2003. Here we are, 2023. We're reviewing it in a retrospective way and seeing how it holds up. Nick, would you mind doing me the honors and reading the logline for 2003's Hulk?
I will, but let me just say, I don't think Marvel's going to do anything special for the 20-year. Just a gut feeling.
You never know.
So the logline here for 2003 Hulk is Bruce Banner, a genetics researcher with a tragic past, suffers an accident that causes him to transform into a raging green monster when he gets angry. Now, this sounds very similar to the canon of Hulk and what you believe Hulk to be if you read the comics, if you know the background of Hulk, something a lot of people may not know. Even people who know me well don't come off as it, but I am quite a bit of a comic book guy. I like canon. I like original storylines. So this log line is very much in line with the canon of Hulk, but we're going to get into how well it toes the line of the original storyline when we get into plot talk.
Plot talk. All right, so we open up on some opening credits. There is some animal research and dissecting going on. We see a lot of starfish, jellyfish samples. We are learning that this is some sort of regeneration testing. Starfish are
just
animals that can
science montage.
A big science montage. That we're trying to get into the fact that this is some sort of test and research focused on regeneration, whether it be body parts or quick healing. This is what we're into. The score, Danny Elfman, he is on the track.
Yeah.
Your boy Danny Elfman stays hella busy. He also did the Spider-Man theme, Sam Raimi's.
He's done a ton. I mean, he did Men in Black. Recently, he did the Netflix phenomenon Wednesday, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I saw him credited on the No Way Home as well.
Yeah, because they used Spider-Man music scores from the original trilogy in No Way Home.
Gotcha. But I mean, he's been, if you look through his catalog. I mean, he's done everything, every genre. He's done stuff for The Simpsons. The Nightmare Before Christmas was his. He's a legend in the industry.
I believe he also did the Michael Keaton Batmans.
He did.
We open up on David Banner, who is Bruce Banner's father. Now, right off the rip here, Nick, you said you are a fan of comic book movies, sticking with the canon, but I believe they already are kind of going in their own route, because in the comics and in the Incredible Hulk, Bruce is the one who makes this formula and injects it into himself. But here in this movie, we're seeing David Banner, his father, trying to create some sort of regeneration formula for military soldiers. He injects it into himself and passes it on to Bruce.
Yeah, in the lore, basically what you're looking at is David Banner being part of a gamma radiation disaster, like a lab explosion, where he's just has this exposure to concentrated gamma rays. So right off the bat, what we're doing is we're rewriting the source material. Now, I'm a huge fan of, if you have source material and you have a whole fan base of this source material, you should stick to the source material. It's a pretty simple formula. You have a whole bunch to draw off of. And yeah, you're right. Right off the bat, they go ahead and they create this world where his father is this gamma radiation scientist, or he's trying to create super soldiers. It's all a little fuzzy on the goal here, but he injects it into himself, and genetically, through having a son, he passes it on to his son.
And before this moment, we are introduced to a character that we will learn the name later, General Ross. He is in this flashback, and he's focused on the present day storyline. He's the one who says, hey, we're going to stop your research, and we don't want any human subjects. So that's when David Banner, Bruce's father, not the rapper, he goes rogue and injects himself and says, I'm going to do it anyway. So right at the start, you kind of recognize how unstable David Banner is. This young David Banner is played by a guy named Paul Kersey, and this was his final acting credit.
Makes sense.
Couldn't say I recognized him.
He has a sick mustache and like 80s mullet thing going on, though, so.
He kind of looked like Tom DeLonge in the First Date music video.
That's a great pull.
Yeah, he kind of looks like Boomer. And we are also introduced to Bruce's mom, Edith Banner. I self-proclaimed pretty much every other episode, if not every episode. I say I am hella good with the faces, right?
Mm-hmm.
I gotta say, I glitched out on Edith Banner for a second. I was like, this lady looks familiar. I think this is Marina Baccarin. Or if you're American, Marina Baccarin. She plays Deadpool's girlfriend.
Yeah.
That's who I thought it was.
They do look similar.
Upon checking on it, this is Cara Bono, a.k.a. Mrs. Wheeler from Stranger Things. I did not recognize her. I glitched out, so I will take that L of my failure on the facial recognition.
I would have never known.
Mrs. Wheeler! She plays the flashback version of Bruce's mother.
Let's just go ahead and summarize what this opening is. Young Bruce Banner sees his father, David Banner, run into the house after he basically activates this gamma meltdown at a military base. They live on a military base. He sees his father run into the room with his mother, and they yell and they argue. And the young Bruce Banner is just staring at the door. And then we cut to present day. So that kind of sets the base. Something traumatic happened. We don't know what it is, yada, yada. And now we're with modern day Bruce.
We flash forward. We are at a Berkeley research lab. We catch up with Bruce, who is going by Bruce Krenzler at the moment. We're introduced to the character Betty Ross, who's played by Jennifer Connelly.
The Jennifer Connelly, yeah.
The Jennifer Connelly. She's been in a bunch of stuff. Very recognizable. Good actor. I liked her in this.
Yeah, I think she did well.
Bruce and Betty were once a thing. We get that they are now exes, and they are trying to do similar work to David Banner about regeneration. They're also testing on animals.
Yes.
they have a toad in the lab, and unfortunately, this toad don't make it. He explodes. This toad explodes.
Frog pop.
It's a frog pop. It's a splody toady. They kind of just lick their wounds after the failed experiment. Betty is kind of prodding at Bruce about his parents and their mysterious death, kind of saying, don't you ever wonder what happened to them? And he's like, no, he shuts it down.
Yeah, I thought this part was weird. This is something I refer to as forced foreshadowing. I don't like this. I like when foreshadowing comes
Don't
up
you mean
in an organic way.
Forced? How would you do that?
Forced shadowing?
Forced shadowing. Why didn't I see that?
It's okay. You didn't foreshadow. I didn't foreshadow.
I tried to force it. That was my problem.
That was the issue. So this is a good example of that, where she asks him about his parents, just out of the blue, right? Nothing organic about a conversation. And he goes, they're dead. What does it matter? And she goes, I just think there's more to you. Based on the history of your parents, who apparently died when you were like 3, that's going to mean there's more to him. I hate this in movies. I really do. And honestly, that forced shadowing almost comes to fruition about 2 minutes later. We're going to get into that, but nothing organic about it.
Throw your arms up when we get there.
I will.
We are then introduced to a character, Glenn Talbot, our boy, Josh Lucas from the movie we hated, Stealth, is in this movie. I kind of smiled.
Lieutenant Ben Gannon from Stealth. So I think this is the first instance of an actor showing up twice on our podcast. And I think there's a part of us that should just go through the Josh Lucas catalog.
Our friend of the show, Josh Lucas, shows up. And he's looking like a real douche. And right off the bat, I can clock this guy. He is the pretty boy, rich guy competition, if you will, to Bruce in a non-existent love triangle of Betty, Bruce, and Glenn, who also goes by Talbot.
Yeah, that's pretty much what he is. It comes out a little later, but Talbot works for a company that's contracted by the Defense Department. They want to use the research to create super soldiers. Basically, the idea is you're either going to work with us or we're going to take over your lab.
Pretty typical stuff.
In the vein of the forced shadowing, we meet this new janitor, Betty Ross, Jennifer Connelly's character. Betty walks out of the lab, meets this new janitor, and she goes, where's Benny? Benny's the old janitor, and this creepy new janitor goes, Benny's dead, I'm the new janitor. Right off the bat, we know this new janitor is sketchy. We find out later, of course, this is Bruce Banner's father, David Banner. So we had the forced shadowing of what about your parents? And then 2 minutes later, we see this creep who ends up being his father. So it's one of those things. There's no organic nature to this world building. It's a plot of convenience. One of my big bugaboos in reviewing films. But we meet this creepy janitor, not revealed to us yet, but we'll get there in a few minutes.
But you know it's Nick Nolte because he has such a raspy, grumpy voice. I'm the new janitor. Benny died. So we got Nick Nolte in the mix. He is conveniently the new janitor of the lab that Bruce and Betty work at. We're introduced to present-day General Ross, who is played by Sam Elliott. This is a guy that was in The Big Lebowski. I personally know him from Parks and Recreation as Ron Dunn. He plays the anti-Ron Swanson.
I know him from a ton of old westerns, Tombstone, things of that nature. He's an iconic character. He was actually in a couple of Marvel properties back then. He was also in Ghost Rider around the same time.
Oh, was he playing the same guy?
He was a little not the same character. No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they weren't that connected yet.
There was no universe. Remember, there's no crossover universe happen here.
But we're making one. We are making one out of the scuffed movies that never had a chance.
If they were the same guy, it would have worked really weird. But Sam Elliott he's also the voice of commercials for Coors. Coors, the banquet beer. So this is the guy.
Yeah, he was recently in A Star Is Born as well. That's the last kind of high profile movie I saw him in. So we're introduced to General Ross. He is Betty's father.
Not just Betty's father, he was the military member who shut down David Banner's work back on the military base.
Who kind of bullied him.
Now, here comes one of my first gripes with the movie. There's a ton up to this point. However, Betty was on this base. David Banner was on this base. They both, at some point in the movie, talk about being on a base. They work together and were at
You
some
mean
point
Bruce?
romantically involved. Bruce, sorry. They never talked about being on a military base together.
Oh, I grew up on a military base. I also grew up on a military base. It was in the desert. I was also in the desert.
It never comes up.
We get this information. It's a memory within a memory. Bruce is looking at a photo. Well, technically, it's just a photo of Bruce, but then we see its footage, and the photo in his
comes
hand
to life.
Comes to life like Harry Potter. Betty steps in because they set up a camera and they're about to pose for a picture with each other. So then we jump into this memory of Bruce and Betty at this cabin, and then we get inceptioned and go into another flashback within this memory, and that's where we see young General Ross shutting down young David Banner, and he kind of throws his lab equipment to the side, says, "You're out of here. We're shutting it down. Go F yourself." And then we go back to the cabin flashback, and then we go back to Bruce looking at his photo. I'm sorry. Is Leonardo DiCaprio in this? Because I didn't see that coming.
Again, this is just convenient storytelling. There's memories, and it's just you're being force fed this information as an audience member.
It was odd, almost as odd as the wild transitions in this movie. This is a talking point that I will expand upon at the end, but you notice it right away. The transitions are hella out of pocket.
It honestly struck me as like a high school PowerPoint presentation. They're using wipes and dissolves and slide transition and the stripe transitions.
Superimpositions. There's not green screen, but basically they'll take a portion of one frame, cut out the foreground, and then in the background they'd superimpose a different image, and then it would mesh together. It was so distracting.
I called it a picture-in-picture transition. That's the best I can describe it as. They basically pull a picture out, put it out in the bottom corner, and then there's like a side-by-side. It was so off-putting.
I have a couple terms for these transitions and editing choices as we chug along through plot talk.
Let's keep going along because David Banner ends up going back to the lab.
Bruce.
And they're just dogs. There's dogs in the lab that he's never seen before. He goes up, tries to pet one of the dogs. One of the dogs tries to bite his hand. He's like, whoa. And that's pretty much the scene. There's a lot of like 30-second scenes in this film. They just cut to something for 30 seconds because they think it's important to show you. But this is also where we basically learn that the janitor is Nick Nolte, who is his father, David Banner. And these are basically his Devil Hulk dogs.
Yeah, and these dogs there's two pit bulls who have their ears cut, which is not cool, and a poodle, which is, in Emily's opinion, the worst dog ever.
I don't think they're good dogs to own personally, but they're not good house dogs.
So he has these three dogs, and these four characters, this band of misfits, are up to no good. The dogs even seem shady. Nick Nolte is one thing. The dogs have a dark side to them.
Yeah.
And they do foreshadow that. They kind of foreshadow that, actually, because Bruce goes to pet the poodle, and guess what? Shocker, it nips at him because it's a poodle.
Bruce just kind of accepts that there's these dogs in the lab. Doesn't seem like a place for dogs to be.
We're at the point where we just kind of are introduced to Nick Nolte as a janitor. We don't know he's the dad. We see he has dogs. Now, there is a gamma accident at the lab, and this also involves Bruce's friend and lab partner, Harper, played by Kevin Rankin, who is introduced at the beginning of the present day scenes, and this is his last scene, and we never see him again.
He just disappears.
Don't know what the point of Harper is. He had a terrible experience at this gamma accident and said, yep, I'm out. I'm going to go find a new career.
Good for him. He was one of the smartest characters in this whole film.
I don't blame him. But Nick, I have to say, during this gamma accident at the lab, Emily called it out when we were watching this. She called it an iPhone shot because Bruce goes up to, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Bruce goes up to the machinery and he pretty much is trying to block the blast. But I mean, you're in a room. Like if you got gamma radiation, I don't think putting your body in front of it is going to do jack squat for your buddy Harper.
Well, I think Harper just fixing the wires and short circuiting one thing shouldn't cause the entire gamma setup to explode. I wrote down this is a very unsafe lab.
There's dogs in the lab. There's no protocol of a sanitary environment. And apparently you can set off a gamma bomb with a couple wires crossed. Bruce goes up and he kind of puts his arms up and braces himself against the machinery. And then it's called an iPhone shot because it looks like it's literally shot on a vertical phone because the left and right side are blacked out as if it's a phone recording vertically. And then there's a freeze frame. It splits the image and stretches and strews Bruce on freeze frame. And there's some sort of Windows 95 graphics, flashing lights as if this is the 70s. I'm sorry. This is 2003. I think we can afford some sort of wobbly visual effect or anything. It definitely took me out of it.
Yeah, something I bring up was a movie we did a few weeks back, which is Minority Report. So all my early 2000s movies, I draw a comparison to that. And I go, okay, this was our technology done well in 2001. And then I watch a movie like Hulk here in 2003 with a $125 million budget. And it's not well shot.
I will throw out something. It might be a directorial choice for the accident scene, because when you are shooting a scene and you know there's going to be visual effects, there's typically a visual effects supervisor on set to kind of lend opinions and important information about how the shot should be set up for the visual effects later, saying you should light it this way, or we need to block out this because it's going to be difficult to adjust this with computer generated imagery. It seems like this might have been an afterthought. They probably said, hey, we'll fix it in post, one of those moments. And the fixing in post was something I can do with the footage I have with zero experience in CGI animation. It was bad.
It's the only explanation for it.
So this gamma accident activates Bruce's genetics. He goes into a hospital room, which I thought was in a hospital, but apparently it is in the lab. And I learned this because David and his 3 shady dogs are all sitting down, watching Bruce sleep in the dark. Bruce says, how'd you get in here? And David says, I'm the new janitor here at the lab. So apparently there's a hospital room in this lab. Going back to your point about how this is an unsafe and unprofessional lab, it's so bad, they know to keep a hospital room on tap.
Can I rewind it about 97 seconds?
I mean, I don't want to relive it, but okay.
We have this moment where David's in the hospital bed.
Bruce.
And he's having this like vivid dream. And this just kind of goes to the whole point of the imagery and what they're trying to convey. He has this dream that involves lizards and floating jellyfish. And it looks like the surface of Mars. And I don't know what they're trying to convey. And I think going back to the lore, they're trying to make Hulk like a lizard thing. That's the point of like the frogs and the toads. At the beginning, it's like a starfish. We're going to get more into like the frog toad part of it, but it's almost like he's being transformed into like a half amphibious individual. That's what they're trying to make Hulk. It's fucking weird.
Are those animals that have like regeneration as part of their qualities as animals, their uniqueness? Because I know starfish are.
Maybe, and lizards and whatnot, but at the end of the day, it goes back to the lore conversation. That's not part of the Hulk lore. So I don't know why he's having these intense images of lizards and starfish and jellyfish and basically the surface of Mars. It's like they're going really hard into this like symbolism thing. And you see this a lot in some of the transitions. Like you'll have this like 5 to 10 second transition of lizards and rocks and starfish It's so unnecessary. It's so unnecessary. I hate it.
It's odd because all of those animals and imagery was from, it should be from David's memories because he was the one in the lab testing on animals. So I don't know why Bruce is having images flash across his mind while he is in this hospital bed.
So we'll move on. I just had to bring that up because that was so weird to me.
Moving on, David Banner, this is where he now drops a hint that he is Bruce's father. And Bruce is like, what? No, get out of here. You're crazy. And David says, they put me away for 30 years, but they couldn't keep me forever. I am sane after all. We'll see about that. So we learned that young David Banner, we thought died in the flashback, is alive, and he's been in a military prison for 30 years.
I guess, yeah.
God knows where. So he puts it into his brain, Bruce's brain, that he is his father. Bruce doesn't really want to believe it, nor does he necessarily believe it. David says, your last name's Banner. It's not Krenzler. So Bruce goes into some researching, trying to uncover the truth. And again, we're going through some crazy images. He's cycling through some traumatic memories. This is when Bruce first transforms into the Hulk, and he destroys the lab. It's our first look at the Hulk. We'll go into it after plot talk. We'll deep dive his design, but he's pop off the screen green. That's how green this guy is. He destroys the lab. He goes ham on it. The next scene we see is Nick Nolte, David Banner. He sees that Bruce has transformed into the Hulk, and he goes up to the Hulk and has an intimate moment, puts his hand up to his face like, my son. And then the Hulk remembers that David Banner is his father, and he's going through all the traumatic memories in his head, and it looks like he's about to straight up squash David, but instead he jumps out of the roof.
Yep.
Nick Nolte, in this scene, I gotta say, not a stellar job at acting. I mean, he's been in so much stuff. He's acclaimed. He's paid his dues, but I gotta say, in this scene, he was not doing it for me. The Hulk jumps out of the roof, jumps away, and there's a crane shot of David, and he's looking up at the hole through the roof, and he's kind of halfway sobbing, and he's like, my Bruce.
My Bruce.
It's just like, it reminded me of Forrest Gump when he says, that's my boat.
It's my boat.
My Bruce.
There's a scene with Betty and Bruce at his place. She's asking if he was at the lab, and he's like, nah, I wasn't. What do you know about this new janitor? He says he's my father. So Betty goes over to David's place for questions. David Banner lives dirty. He's got hella newspapers on the floor, and he has about 14 terrariums, which is living spaces for lizards and snakes. Kind of like a fish tank, but for reptiles.
He is creepy.
He's hella creepy. I mean, that's just Nick Nolte's aura and his vibe, but he is hella creepy.
He's like looking at Betty, being like, I could see why he's so taken by a woman like you.
He starts off the conversation saying, the world is jealous of Bruce's uniqueness. And then it flips a switch 0 to 100, and he goes full creep mode. He sits next to Jennifer Connelly, not flirting with her, but definitely, I'll say, hitting on her.
Sexually charged language.
There's a difference there between flirting and hitting on. I think hitting on is a little bit more unwanted, just the term itself.
Very much
and
so.
Flirting is like, it's a little bit more mutually agreed upon.
Yes.
So he's hitting on Betty Ross, but we learn that he's using his creepiness as a cover up for him to swipe her scarf, which we will learn why in a scene or two later. And she even clocks this. She sees that David comes over and takes her scarf and then gets up and pretty much does the, well, let me let you go, talk to her. And she sees the scarf in his hand, and she's like, you know what? I'm just going to cut my losses and leave because I don't want this psychopath to chop me up and feed me to his dogs. Meanwhile, we got a different parent-child scene. We got Bruce talking to General Ross, Betty's father, and he's basically interrogating Bruce about being at the lab. And General Ross does not like Bruce. He does not trust Bruce because he knows who Bruce is. He knows that he is David Banner's son. I don't know how, because he goes by Bruce Krensler.
Again, this kind of goes back to the whole Bruce and Betty being on the same base. This could really, a lot of this could have been solved if somebody just would have said something. Like, hey, Betty, my daughter, you're working with the son of a domestic terrorist. You should really sort this out before you let him start working on these projects.
Yeah, and
But
he's
no.
he's grilling Bruce. He's grilling him. He's like, "You were 4 years old. How could you forget something like that?" And they leave us with a thing of mystery. Just again, like, why doesn't Bruce remember? And I wonder what that was. There's going to be a huge payoff at the end. And then we get to a scene where David calls Bruce and basically explains vaguely what happened to him. He explains to Bruce that he has a genetic deformity from his own experiment that he passed on to him. So Bruce now understands this, and he leaves the phone call with a vague threat alluding to the point that his dogs are going to go kill Betty. And I thought, that's weird. Why would you send 3 dogs to go kill somebody? Why don't you just do the dirty work yourself?
You had her in your house.
We will learn that later.
A big part for me was I'm sitting here. One, don't do the comic book villain thing. I know it's a comic book film, technically. Don't do the comic book villain thing where you tell clearly you watched your son genetically mutate into this Hulk, so you know he can stop it. Why would you tell him that you're sending these dogs to kill Betty? And at the point in time, we have no idea why David wants Betty dead. I don't know his motivation.
The only thing he kind of says is you can't trust her. You don't know what she's capable of, or you don't know much about her. And I didn't really understand why he said that. The only thing I can think of is he knows that she's General Ross's daughter, and General Ross and him are butting heads back in the day. So it just seems like secondhand bias opinion on the daughter.
I just don't know why wouldn't you just go kill General Ross at that point.
Instead, he's going to send his 3 dogs to go kill Betty. And this is why he needed the scarf. He says, hey, take the scarf, smell the scent, and go kill this lady. Apparently, he trained these 3 dogs to do just that. While the dogs are running all the way across town to a cabin somewhere where Betty lives. Meanwhile, we're in a city location. I'm assuming Berkeley or Oakland or Alameda or something like that, because
we
that's
switch
where
locations so often in this film.
That's where this general story takes place. But Betty's in a cabin in the woods. She could be in Marin County for all I know. I don't know. Are these dogs paying a bridge toll?
It looks like she's up like in Truckee.
$7 a pop. $7 a pup. Am I right?
If you have an extra axle on that bitch, you're looking at an extra $4.
So while the dogs are in transport to Betty, Glenn, our boy, Josh Lucas, he goes to Bruce's house and basically starts kind of bullying him and beats him up. I think it's because, why did he do that? Because
I don't know why Talbot hates Bruce Banner.
It's because he's jealous, because he has Betty's attention.
But at the same time, it just seems like such an adversarial relationship. Where it's just like, you have Betty's attention. I'm going to beat you up in this house.
He's just basically like a high school bully that doesn't like Bruce, because on the surface, he likes to pretend that he's rich and more successful, but he just, like so many movies do, he's not that guy.
You know, I hate a lack of character development. And Talbot here, Glenn Talbot, has no character development. He is just basically the bully of Bruce Banner.
He is a 1-speed douchebag in this movie.
Yeah, it sucks. Anyway, so he goes to beat up Bruce in the house.
Shocker, Bruce turns into the Hulk because he's getting angry and then beats the shit out of Glenn Talbot.
And everybody.
Who has to be hospitalized.
He kicks a car into a house across the street. Unfortunate.
Yeah, so he kind of cripples a couple agents and Glenn in that moment. Meanwhile, we discover that the 2 pit bulls and the poodle are not regular dogs. These are hulked out dogs, which I guess David, he said that he recreated the regeneration formula or something from David or Bruce's DNA.
Yeah, because he was sneaking around in the lab as the janitor.
Okay, yeah, he did grab like a hair strand or something. So that's we're grasping at straws here with this plot point. I didn't really dig that, and I
If he
especially
could do
didn't.
that, why wouldn't he just turn himself into a Hulk?
Well, it's so weird because he's after Bruce's power. So wouldn't you just kind of give yourself the cocktail shot? I don't know, because
He clearly
gave
figured
himself
out the
shot.
power.
He
Yeah.
gave himself the shot in the beginning, and then why is Bruce different?
Again,
They could have avoided
James.
all this if they didn't deviate from the comics. Whatever. Anyway, these scrappy ass dogs. Do you remember Scooby-Doo, the live action one?
Yes.
Remember when Scrappy Doo like hulks out?
Yes. It's pretty much that scene. Yeah.
That is the same energy we are bringing here in this movie. These are some cartoonish looking CGI dogs. Was it green saliva at the mouth?
Yeah, they were just like radiating. It looks like almost like kryptonite. It's like this glowing
outlandish,
green.
Out of pocket. Who let the dogs out?
Apparently David. So now we know what's going to happen. We know that the Hulk is going to have to go and fight these devil dogs. And they do outside of Betty's house. But they do this really weird thing that I don't like when these movies do. And it's this CGI fight in the dark. And I can't see shit.
Well, I'm shocked because the Hulk is so green. He sticks out like a sore thumb. Day or night, he is glowing green.
He is radiating green, but I can barely see shit in this fight scene. So it's like this dark CGI fight. Maybe they did it intentionally so that they could hide some of the terrible CGI work.
They can cover up the CGI flaws.
But all I'm sitting there thinking, it's like, I don't know what's happening right now. I don't know who's winning. I don't know how many dogs are left. He may have killed one of the dogs. I don't know.
Well, they make it pretty clear how they die. Enter the animal abuse scene. This is where the Hulk is beating up these dogs. They're up in the trees. Hulk is just straight up punching these dogs, and I gotta say, I'm not really cool with it. If they're big and monstrous CGI creatures, or if they're regular dogs, I don't like seeing dogs get hurt.
Neither do I. And it's funny you bring up the trees because they're just like at this regular, like you said, cabin, maybe in Marin. That's kind of our best guess. And all of a sudden they hop up into the trees like it's Avatar or Tarzan with like these big branches you can stand on. I'm like, these aren't redwoods. Like these should be like not trees that a Hulk can stand on. We're going to get into his weight distribution later on because that's a problem. But let me bring up the first inconsistency I see with the CGI happening at this point. It'll come up later. The scale of Hulk is so inconsistent in this movie.
Very.
At one point, his head is as big as an entire human being, and then maybe he only stands 9 feet tall, and then he jumps. I have no idea how big these dogs are compared to him. The scaling is all over the place.
I didn't know if that was by design because at that scene where he beats up Glenn and the police start shooting, I want to say he was growing, and I think it's because he was getting angrier.
If that's the case, again, you punched the lore in the face.
So on this planet of Endor, where the Ewoks live, Hulk slaps the shit out of the poodle. It sounds like a wet towel whip. And he basically chucks the poodle off into the distance, and then it poofs into green dust. So that's how we know they died, when they poof into green dust. It appears that he grows his trap on command to break the jaw of the pit bull that has a locked bite on his shoulder. And then he rips that dog into dust, and it literally sounds like a paper ripping. The third dog he smashes on the ground, and poof, green dust.
If he can grow when he gets angry and the dogs are made like him, why aren't the dogs doing that? I don't know. I kind of want to be done with this scene. I'm so mad.
Yeah, I got a big nitpick coming up later that kind of relates to a lot of things that unfold in this movie. But I have to say, plus 1 point for Naked Bruce. The shorts should not expand to Hulk size and then shrink down to person size. We see this in a lot of Hulk properties. The pants go back to normal size. He didn't design special pants to grow and shrink. Once they expand, which they shouldn't, they should just explode and we should just be seeing cucumbers swing all around the scene. It's a done deal. The shorts are done. So I have to say kudos.
We'll see it later. Don't worry.
Yeah, oh, no, we will. I mean, for whatever reason,
Not the cucumber, but the growing
not
pains.
we won't see the cucumber. But for whatever reason, this scene has naked Bruce, and I'm like, okay, finally, something believable. The shorts didn't shrink back down. But later they do. There's no scene where he goes to some guy and says, hey, I need you to make me some growing and shrinking shorts, please. And the guy says, yeah, I'll have them be ready on Friday. It's just short. It's just purple shorts that Bruce always has. That's what we're working with. So Betty's talking to Bruce, and he is describing how it feels to be Hulk. And he says that it feels like a dream, and the dream is filled with rage, power, and freedom. That's what it feels like to be the Hulk.
He says he likes it.
He says he likes it. And again, this is going to be a talking point later, but it is kind of a theme throughout our plot talk so far. That's another deviation from the comics. Bruce and the Hulk are within the same being, but they are dueling personalities. They don't like each other. So it doesn't make sense for Bruce to say, oh, I liked it. It's, no, you're not Hulk. Hulk is a different personality within you, like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation. Betty is suggesting that anger is the thing that triggers the nanomeds within Bruce. Or Bruce says it's supposed to respond to physical damage, the nanomeds, but Betty counters with emotional damage can manifest physically, like serious trauma or repressed memories. And that's where, again, we're kind of going back to what happened when Bruce was a child, what happened behind that locked door at the desert base. What are they not telling us?
Yep.
So then Bruce hears a knock at the door, and he gets shot with a dart. And I gotta say, MCU Hulk wouldn't let that slide. Hulk knows when to spit out a bullet. But for the sake of the plot, he needs to be incapacitated with a dart and then transported to the same desert base from the beginning of the movie, which apparently blew up.
Well, I think Bruce's dad David blew it up with the gamma thing, like the gamma explosion.
Right.
That's what I try to believe. So I just want to bring that point up. The fact that David Banner is running around as a janitor, you can't tell me this domestic terrorist, high-profile military prisoner was just let out and not kept tabs on.
Record time.
He's just out there floating around, trying to kill people, creating Hulk dogs, assumingly no one knows where he is.
I feel like, yeah, they would definitely keep him on a watch list. If you kept somebody for 30 years, you don't just let them off scot-free and not keep tabs on them. You're right.
But he's not hiding anywhere because Betty found him with his employment records as the janitor, so he's not even using a fake address.
This will come up in one of my biggest nitpicks at the end.
Okay, well, let's keep going.
I have a lot to say about the transport sequence. This is what
It was so jarring.
This is what we were alluding to earlier, talking about the editing and the transitions. It seems like they wanted to use every shot that they recorded during this week of filming, because you get every single angle of this movie. There's 4 different shots of helicopters. It's the same 3 helicopters transporting Bruce. There's also a convoy on the ground, and the helicopters are air support in case he hulks out and breaks out of the capsule.
I don't know.
But my God, Nick, at one point there was 4 panels of helicopters. And like you said, it was real picture in picture. It's not 4 quadrants of the screen divided up. These are moving panels within the screen. They're fading away. They're transitioning into each other. They're growing in size. They expand. They contract. And then there's 5 panels. There's one moment when, so in the background, there's 2 shots and they fade in transition. Meanwhile, in the foreground, there's 3 panels, like a picture-in-picture situation, that fade away in sequence in front of this. And I finally realized where I see this kind of editing, and I call this heist editing. This is the kind of editing you see in a heist movie.
It's like Ocean's 11.
But not all the time throughout the movie. It's during the big heist when it's like Brad Pitt's over here, and George Clooney's over here, and Don Cheadle's over here doing the sleight of the hand. It's real sassy, fluid transitions, expanding screens, contracting screens. and you're seeing multiple things unfold at once. This movie does this constantly, and not even in good form. Holy fuck, there's so many moving panels of shots, is what I wrote down.
Nothing hit the editing bay floor. On Lee was like, if we shot it, we're using it. It was frugal, I'll say that much.
This seems like a music video. It seems like this transport sequence goes on for 4 minutes with all these crazy transition editing gimmicks. Meanwhile, at David's house, David Banner, again, not the rapper, this is Nick Nolte, creepy old Nick. There's about 20 SWAT officers outside of his house, and they're about to raid it. So I don't know if David knows this, and he goes into his underground basement lab and then gammas himself, or if this just happened to be at the same time.
Did he steal all this gamma equipment from the lab? I don't know how he got all...
Again, I'm
this
sorry.
Domestic terrorist.
I'm sorry to keep saying this, but remember that big nitpick I have? It connects. Yeah. It connects to the entire timeline of David Banner. That's my big nitpick.
I can't wait for the nitpick.
It's a hefty one. It's a Hulk size one.
So he gammas himself, and he has this cut on his hand, and this like blob of blood comes out.
He lands on a exploded gas tank or canister and cuts his hand, and then his blood kind of becomes like an anti-gravity blob, like a flubber, red flubber.
Yeah, and it rests on this metal surface, and then it becomes one with the surface. So he could basically take on the molecules of whatever he's touching. And so he touches with his hand this metal surface. His hand blends into it. His foot becomes molds into a metal grate. And I hate this because all of a sudden, after 20 seconds, he fully understands his power. This security guard cop. So I think they're at the lab because the security guard is just a security guard's there, and he's like, what are you doing?
Oh,
and Nick Nolte gives him this I think I don't know. I don't know where a lot of this stuff is happening at.
Oh, okay.
But there was a security guard.
That might take something away from my nitpick, but not really too much. I thought he was in a basement in his house.
I think he's in the lab. I don't know how he's able to access
that.
All
Makes
this stuff
a lot
in the
more
lab.
sense. That makes a lot more sense because there's 20 SWAT officers raiding his house, and then the first person to walk in on David is a security guard. So no, you're correct. I must be wrong. He's not at his house. He is at the lab.
But he gives this security guard this speech of
what's happening here?
You see the strength of my son's DNA combined with nanomed reconstruction?
My molecules can now do whatever. It's you don't know. You don't know anything. Your hand just became metal and your foot got stuck in a grate. So his hand turns into, he melts his hand with this machine, and then he, swings this machine at the security guard and crushes him.
It's like a giant metal cart that has some sort of electronic devices integrated into it. It seems like a hefty cart, but he straight up squanches the security guard against the floor.
Put your hands up, pal, okay?
I don't want to keep bringing up movies we watched, but Minority Report did a really good job of basically showing you the world and its limitations. And here, they just kept fucking doing stuff and just asking you to accept that this is how it is. We don't know how his power works. He just melded with a cart and smashed a security guard with it. We're like, what the fuck? He had blobby blood. I hate that shit. But anyway, that's that. And so we just accept that. And then we go back to this destroyed military base. Apparently, they never rebuilt any part of it. So this is where Betty and Bruce grew up. They still never acknowledge hey, we grew up in the same military base. Nope, never gets talked about.
So they go to his childhood house, and he has some sort of triggering memories. We don't see it, but they're there. Betty goes back home to her cabin in the woods. Bruce is moved into some sort of containment chamber. Glenn comes in with casts and all. He is messed up from their last altercation. Bold move coming in and prodding Bruce while you're medically fucked up, trying to get him to transform so you can take a sample out of him.
He locks the two of them in a room, and he's trying to make Bruce turn into the Hulk.
Like, that's a bad idea, dude.
It's the worst idea.
He has a whole agenda of trying to extract DNA or samples from the Hulk to essentially make his own regenerative formula so he could sell it off to the military, I think is his whole goal in this movie. I'm not sure.
Again, we just keep cutting from scene to scene to scene. There's no fluidity.
Creepy old David. All of a sudden, Betty is back home. She was just at the desert town, but now she's back at her house, which is not the cabin, right?
Right.
Yeah, no, they're in a house, like in the city.
Yeah.
So she has 2 properties, so she's doing well for herself. So way to go, Betty. Like in some sort of city in the Bay Area.
2 homes in California, so she's killing it.
I don't know how she's doing it. I'm just slumming it in this duplex, but here we are. So David sneaks into Betty's house to ask if her dad can let him see Bruce one last time before he gets put away. I don't know how he knows he's going to be put away or assumes that. They just released him. Okay, yeah,
brother,
you got nothing, so we're moving on.
There's a lot of this that I'm going to look at you and just have dead eyes because
You're going to refer to me? That's scary. So David is explaining to Betty the story of their last day as a family on the base. He called Bruce a monster in the story, referring to him as a child. But I have a question. How did he know that Bruce was a monster? The only thing they mentioned is, Bruce got injured while playing with this other kid, but he didn't cry or really bleed that much. That's all that was said. So I'm confused as to what is the indicator that Bruce is some sort of deformed monster as a child after David's experiment on himself, which he then genetically passed on to Bruce.
I don't know, James.
Shrug City.
James, I don't know.
Shrug City, bish.
So he basically calls his son a monster, and we finally find out what happened to Bruce when he was a kid with his parents fighting. So when his parents went behind the door, David basically told Bruce's mom, hey, I'm going to kill our kid because he's a monster.
This is because David was trying to find a cure. Again, I don't know for what. I don't know what is the matter with Bruce. But David kept saying, I can't cure him, so I need to kill him. And I don't know why. Bruce hasn't done anything wrong.
Up until the Gamma accident, Bruce was a completely normal, super smart individual.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. This all started in Berkeley, so he wasn't a monster at all his entire childhood. So I'm confused as to why David thought, one, he needed to cure his son, who was showing no signs of abnormal qualities, and two, his next solution is to murder his own kid with a knife.
I mean, Bruce's skin was kind of like blotchy and green, which was weird because it was like, oh, as a kid, he showed that. But then as an adult, we never see any signs of that. Again, weird. Long story short, David goes to kill Bruce when he's a kid with a knife. Bruce's mom tries to stop him. David ends up killing his wife. But his wife, weirdly, is still like rolling and crawling around on the floor. I don't know.
The truth is finally revealed, and it is pretty much out of left field.
Yeah.
Bruce is cycling through this memory. It transitions from David's storytelling to Bruce's psyche, and he hulks out during Glenn's DNA extraction procedure. He's in some sort of
shocker
water Bacta tank. He busts out, becomes the Hulk. And this is where we get a wide shot of where his body is very disproportioned.
It makes no sense.
He's like so thick, and he's pretty much just like stretched out horizontally. Then they say, release the foam because the Hulk is loose in the hallways. So there's some sort of magic foam that can stop the Hulk, who from comic lore has unlimited strength. But this foam, which they need to patent and sell to everybody and make a fortune.
That foam could stop a crack in the Hoover Dam.
This foam can stop the goddamn Hulk. So Glenn limps up with his one long cast on his leg. He's got one of those neck braces bruised up. He has a giant syringe gun. He's like, I need to take a sample out of this guy.
I feel like someone else should be doing this with Glenn so fucking injured.
And literally one of the dozens of soldiers you have there who are able-bodied and can do this for you. But no, Glenn is hellbent on getting a sample out of the green guy. So he comes up, and guess what? The Hulk does his signature move. It's his version of the people's elbow.
The trap flex.
He grows his trap. The trap grow and starts to break free. All the soldiers start dispersing, running away, and Glenn says, hey, give me that M12 or whatever. I think it's some sort of small grenade launcher. Again, Josh Lucas, big grenade launcher guy.
All of a sudden, he's not injured anymore. Injuries have gone away.
So this is where he shoots off this small grenade launcher. It bounces off Hulk and goes to the wall behind him. This is where we have the greatest death scene possibly in cinema history.
It's the best.
Lost my shit at this scene.
Dude.
It bounces off the wall and it explodes. Josh Lucas does this very great, over the top, exaggerated, shocked look on his face that this grenade is now behind him on a wall. So let me try to visually explain this. So Glenn screams and he leaps forward, kind of like an unathletic kid, kind of like one leg on the ground and one arm in the air, like he's really trying to jump far. It freezes on him. It freeze frames on that. He's then green screened onto a generic exploding background. His freeze frame is given a thick outline, like a thick white outline. He's cropped out of a photo. Then the generic background of exploding flames is still moving while he is frozen, followed by the flames then wrapping around his frozen image. Then this is where I lost it again. I was laughing my ass off at Glenn's death scene, and then I was immediately brought back down to earth about why I can't stand watching this movie, because we get a warped view of the most panels we see on screen to date. I counted, Nick. There was 18 panels on screen.
So many panels.
And not even like hey, we're zooming out of this panel and we're zooming into this one. We take a three-dimensional angle away from it. We kind of swoop upwards to the right, and we're looking at 18 panels downwards, not straight on. And then we zoom back into a different panel, which is also split screened. And then we continue the story. And I got to say, this editing is taking me out of the movie. I can't stand this. It's like
it's so
the guy
bad.
who made all the transitions for iMovie beta tested them in this movie and said, hey, okay, I gave you all 53 of my crazy transitions. Which ones do you want to integrate into iMovie? And they picked 20 of them to go into iMovie. This movie had them all. It was over fucking whelming.
Dude, it was jarring. It was too much. But then we get to the classic Hulk scene that now we're aware of. It's the Hulk basically versus the might of the military. Okay? Now let me just say something. When the first tank missile does not affect the Hulk, stop. Just stop. Because it's not working. So the Hulk destroys all of these tanks. And then they send in helicopters. What the fuck is a helicopter going to do that a tank was not able to do? You're just putting people in harm's way. Also, I think this goes back to the reptile frog thing. But he just jumps for... He could basically move faster than any other superhero just by broad jumping.
He can fly.
He can essentially fly. And also, the military is just keeping up with him as he's going. I don't even know how fast he's going.
Bounding hundreds of miles per jump.
The military just is tracking him the whole way.
So the Hulk can fly. And I have a question. What was with the choice of the Middle Eastern music in this southwestern American desert?
Dude, it reminded me of the joke, another Nick Nolte film, the music at the beginning of Tropic Thunder when Four Leaf is getting shot in the Vietnamese war scene.
Survive.
And it's just like this Middle Eastern like chanting like in the middle of this American desert. I'm assuming Nevada or New Mexico.
This is Arizona, New Mexico, and Southern California. This is where we are. Why is there Middle Eastern generic music?
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm over that one.
I wish I
so
knew.
there's a helicopter fight in the canyon. Then we get back to the Bay Area. There is jets at the Golden Gate. I guess the Hulk he's on top of the Golden Gate Bridge.
It's like a King Kong scene.
This scene was a little bit silly to me. There's helicopters there and jets, and they're unaware of each other that they're there because the jet doesn't see the helicopter until the last second. He's like, I gotta pull up. And he's like, I can't pull up. And then I'm like, don't you have radar? Don't you have air traffic control?
Something.
Should you know you shouldn't be flying in the fog if visuals are impairing you?
Shouldn't jets be a little higher up than helicopters?
Are you going to launch missiles upon this green monster on top of this very populated bridge that you didn't shut down?
Yeah, so the jet's about to crash into the Golden Gate Bridge. Not one of the piers, not one of the tall towers, but into the actual bridge, the road structure. And so the Hulk jumps on the jet to like force it down a little bit. And then the jet pulls up. Again, I talked earlier about the Hulk's weight distribution not making sense. Earlier when he was jumping on things, he was crushing things. Then he lands on the Golden Gate Bridge catwalk. Like the catwalk can hold 5 tons. I don't know. And then he jumps on this jet and the jet just kind of like lowers down 20 feet. How heavy is he?
I feel like it would.
He took down a helicopter in the last scene by just hanging on it.
Doesn't matter because this jet the jet that couldn't pull up pulls straight up and goes into space. They don't say I'm going into space, but they definitely leave the Earth's atmosphere because we go from blue sky to black sky.
He just keeps climbing. And I want to bring something up. General Ross, the pilot of the jets, just basically like, I'm not going to have enough air. And General Ross makes this really declarative statement that says he'll lose consciousness before you do. How the fuck do you know that? It's a green monster on top of this jet.
You don't know the properties.
You don't know anything about this monster. He just wore every missile you shot at him, and you think he's going to run out of air up there? You don't know anything.
I think he was just bluffing. He's like, Godspeed to that pilot. Let's see how this goes.
Well, apparently General Ross is the smartest man in the world because he does lose consciousness.
He's like, yes, I nailed it.
He's like, finally got something right.
Bruce comes crashing down to the earth. He lands into the water. He is underground, kind of like Tremors, like those monsters
He's
underneath.
tremoring.
It's like he be tremoring through San Francisco, uphill, under cable car tracks.
Through the sewer pipes.
So yeah, is he in the sewer pipes?
Bro, I don't know.
He travels about a mile inland, underground, and then finally decides to bust up in the middle of the street. And then Betty shows up conveniently and calms him down. Again, you said King Kong like scene at the Golden Gate Bridge. An Lee was going for King Kong similarities with the love interest and the beast and how the love interest can calm down the beast. Hulk transforms back into Bruce. And you know what? I gotta say, kudos for the full transformation on screen. Because a lot of the times in today's Hulk movies, they cut away a lot. We don't really see the full Bruce the Hulk.
Yes, but this was also one of those moments where throughout this whole scene when he's the Hulk, they did the stretchy purple pants.
Yes.
And I understand you're going for the classic Hulk look, but at no point was he ever wearing purple shorts in the movie. And then all of a sudden he pops out into this fight scene with purple shorts on.
Whenever he grows into the Hulk, he just generates those purple shorts, man.
Apparently.
I did give it kudos for the full transformation in one shot, but you do see the CGI shorts poorly shrink down to proportion as well and just stick on his waist. Don't fall down at all.
Nope.
They're not a size 89 waistline. They go back to a 33 real quick.
Some pretty powerful shorts.
The shorts be the MVP of this movie. So we go to a lab on Treasure Island. There's a lot of labs spread around this movie.
A lot of labs.
There's a desert lab. There's the Berkeley lab. I thought David had a private lab, but apparently that was Berkeley lab. Now we're at a lab at Treasure Island. David Banner is brought in. Bruce is detained in a chair in front of a giant jet engine incinerator. I'm talking about Hulk.
Pause.
Pausing.
Every ridiculous thing that happened in this movie from this moment on pales in comparison to what's about to happen in this film.
Oh, here we go.
Everything that's happened, every ridiculous moment up to this, the last 15 to 20 minutes of the film, is a cakewalk compared to what the viewer is about to experience.
The dogfight be damned.
I just want to set the scene. When someone asks why was this movie bad, it is what is about to happen here.
Nick's laying the groundwork.
Please continue.
David's brought in, and he gets a sit down with his son per a request. You labeled him as a domestic terrorist. I don't know why anybody would figure, yeah, you should definitely have, we'll definitely do you this favor and bring you in so you can talk to your monstrous son, Bruce, who destroyed a quarter of San Francisco and an entire military base in the desert. Why not? Why wouldn't we do you that favor?
And not even have him chained up to a chair. Bruce is chained up to a chair. David Banner's just allowed to be all willy-nilly.
Free balling, which is a mistake because very soon, right after he goes on a rant about hating the military and regret about not handling his son's situation as a child, he says he needs his power. He needs Bruce's power. I don't know what David's goal is.
I don't know anything.
Here's the story arc of David Banner in this movie. He wants to contribute to the military by making a super sick regeneration formula for his soldiers so they can heal very quickly on the battlefield, which then brings him to testing it on himself, which gives him some sort of genetic deformity, which we don't explore at all, which then he passes on to Bruce. He wants to then cure Bruce. Then he wants to kill Bruce. He kills his wife. He becomes a crazy hermit for 30 years. And then at this point in the movie, he wants to have Bruce's power for God knows what reason. Okay, another shrug moment from Nicholas.
You're looking at me as if I have an answer for this.
I'm just looking at you because you're the only one here sharing this with me.
So Nick Nolte, out of frustration with Bruce for not giving him his power, I don't know, he picks up this big wire that's laying on the ground by this machine, and he just bites it. He just munches on it, and the electricity flows through him, and he becomes this giant electric man.
He's like, oh yeah, this will show you. He bites this thick cord. It's about 7 inches in diameter.
Yeah, so he becomes this electric man. We're going to let that slide. And then he basically becomes lightning. And he is now one with the clouds and the sky.
Yeah, so he becomes an electric giant anomaly. Oh, Bruce probably hulks out and then busts out of the chair that he's in. And then they have some sort of fight that you can barely see what's going on. It is hyper.
Well, the Hulk gets sucked up into the sky.
Yes, and that's because David goes from being a giant electric man to a power-sucking green tornado. Now, upon research after this movie, it appears that David Banner has the same powers as famous Hulk villain, the Absorbing Man, which is all in the name. He can absorb materials and powers of whatever he touches, but they never state that in the movie.
No.
So we have to assume David Banner is now the Absorbing Man.
David Banner just became weather.
He becomes a giant water man.
Well, not just a giant water man. They're in a lake, and he just becomes the lake.
Did they fly there?
They didn't fly there. David picked him up into the sky. Then we have these weird like flashes of lightning in the sky where we see Hulk getting tossed around in the tornado, and he gets tossed, and then the lightning comes down and strikes David Banner down next to like a lake, and then the water comes out. Fuck all if I know. All I know is that at some point now they're underwater, and David Banner is the lake.
So David says, the more you fight, Bruce, the more I take. He literally explains that to us, the audience, and Bruce, mid-fight.
The more you fight, the more of you I take.
Literally. And then Bruce says, take it off! Take it off! And then David's like, it's too much.
Take it back!
It's just going ham. Threat level midnight is Twister meets Hurricane Heist by Rob Cohen.
No one knows what's happening.
And then General Ross decides to drop a big giant green nuke on the situation.
Everything's green.
Big green mushroom. And then they're just both pronounced dead at the scene. But we do see Bruce floating in the water. We flash forward to 1 year later.
Then we just get the 1 year later. So nothing here is explained.
No.
Nothing here is explained.
No, they drop a bomb and say, cool, mission accomplished. And then we're hit with the 1 year later title card. General Ross calls Betty, asks if Bruce were alive today, would he tell her? And she's like, nah, dog. Shocker, Bruce is alive, not David, though. Don't know why he didn't survive. Well, maybe he did. They don't necessarily say he didn't. But Bruce is alive. He's in some sort of South American country. He's dealing out medicine to small villages. Some cartel members or bad guys roll up with guns and they're like, we're going to take all your medicine. And he says, you're making me angry. You're not going to like me when I'm angry, but in Spanish. And then it ends with a roar and
there's a tree frog on his hat.
There's
so
a
we're
tree
doing
frog.
the whole frog thing again.
Again, yeah, we are back to the amphibians. There's a green frog on his hat. Don't know what that's about. Probably because he can leap like a frog. So we zoom out. It's a wide shot. It ends with a roar, and the very vibrantly green forest turns into a plain green screen. And we roll credits.
That's Hulk.
That wraps up plot talk for Hulk. Now, before we get into some quick talking points here, that plot talk really dragged on. Holy crap.
There's a lot.
I need to go into my nitpicks.
Nitpicks.
And I'm not sure if you have any nitpicks yourself. My big nitpick has to do with the David Banner timeline. So, General Thunderbolt Ross says, quote, a month after David was released, the lab incident happened. Okay, so you just opened up a whole can of worms for me, thinking about what he's been doing in this time and how he accomplished all this. This means that David has only been living or squatting at this down and dirty junkyard of a house for less than a month. In this month's time, since he was released, being in a military prison for 30 years, he has been released from a military prison, who God knows where is, has tracked down David in Berkeley, has moved to the Bay Area, applied, passed background checks, and got a job at the specific lab Bruce works at, collected the minimum of 14 terrariums, a year's worth of newspapers, and 3 dogs, all in a month.
Yep.
And successfully recreated the regenerating formula he got from Bruce's DNA. He should be a detective, not a janitor.
I mean, this goes along with one of my biggest nitpicks is you just let this man off the radar after you released him from military prison. Again, domestic terrorist, enemy of the state, whole deal. He was just off and free to go hang out, figure things out. I don't understand. It just seems like a very incompetent military. And then when it comes to even fighting the Hulk, you can only throw so many missiles at something until you're like, wait a minute, wait a gosh darn minute. This just ain't working. I have more nitpicks. I think we're going to get into the talking points. So what do you say we go ahead and transfer our way over there?
That wraps up our nitpicks. Some talking points. We got to talk about the big elephant in the room here, or the big green guy in the room. It's the Hulk design. What are your thoughts on
awful.
Okay. Do you have anything more to expand upon that, or just kind of like what you said throughout plot talk?
I think it's pretty much what I said during the plot talk here. One of the biggest things is the inconsistency in his proportions, right? The ratio of the Hulk to everything around him. His greenness is a problem for me. He grows a little bigger. There's sometimes when he kind of looks like Bruce Banner, and there's sometimes like when he was in the foam where his head just looks like a giant square blockhead, like Frankenstein.
It looked like a Lego head, yeah.
It really did. It was so inconsistent. I don't even want to say I give people the benefit of the doubt as far as it was early in CGI because, again, I have to compare this to other movies at the time. I want to know where the $125 million went because I don't think this could have all been for the CGI. Maybe they should have not cast Sam Elliott and spent some more money in that department. I don't know.
Thanks, Sam.
I wish I knew.
Yeah, it's like they tried for male model facial features, but they had to then stretch it onto an oversized head with a comically disproportionate body. Because like the whole like Hulk has like a jawline and like a butt chin almost.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's like supposed to be handsome, but it's some sort of uncanny valley there. It's like handsome Squidward for me.
It's weird. Uh,
Going
I
on your
wish I
body,
knew.
your disproportionate body. He's kind of like a WWE created character.
That's a great.
Yeah, he's just like stretched and strewed, and he's got no neck. He's all body that's been expanded horizontally. When you create your character, the thighs they kind of like mesh into each other because they're so big. That's kind of like the same vibe. There was definitely a lot of friction between those green thighs, if you know what I'm saying, and the
Yes.
purple shorts were getting worked. There's no texture, like you touched upon. He is way too green. It's like they cranked the saturation to 180%.
You're like fucking with the hue on your TV. You don't know what it is, but you're just like cranking it all the way
You are
up.
cranking the saturation to the max. So he is super green, he's super smooth, and there's no texture. And that just has to do with trying to do a Hulk movie in 2003 when you didn't really have the technology ready yet. Give it another only 5 years. Incredible Hulk looked great, looked decent, holds up today. Hulk today looks even better. The visuals by today's standards, pretty astounding. For all the shit we give Avatar, the visuals are top notch. Avenger, Thanos, today's Hulk, top notch. 2003 smooth Hulk, not about it.
Awful.
Pretty bad. And this brings me to my next talking point, the CGI. Ang Lee was allegedly heavily involved with the CGI and the animators trying to push the boundaries of what could be done. But ultimately, as we discussed, it failed. So having said that, Nick, do you think even if the CGI was good by today's standards, would that help this movie's case more so to be considered a success, or is it still just all over the place?
I don't think it would make the movie a success. It would give us one less thing to rag on. The CGI of the Hulk himself is right in line with the rest of the terrible things that we've been talking about with this movie. It's not like they were trying to do all this cool stuff and just kind of failed. It was all really in the same vein of stuff. It was a little schlocky. It was a little too comic booky. Because that's pretty much what all those transitions were. They were trying to do the frames like the comic book panels.
Yeah, and we were talking about this before we started recording. We didn't know that was supposed to be. We didn't know that's what An Lee was going for. We thought it was a bunch of gimmicky transitions, and then after the fact, or maybe you realized it halfway through the movie. I didn't realize that until after the movie that this was trying to replicate comic panels.
I only realized it at about Glenn's death when it was so comic booky. We talked about how shitty it looked. And it was,
So,
I had to
so
say to
funny.
myself, like, there's no way that it was just that bad. And then I realized it was almost trying to be like a comic book panel, and it kind of shrunk into a little square and went off of the screen and gave way to the next scene. That I was like, oh, is that what they're trying to do? The worst thing you could ever have as a director of a movie is when someone looks and says, is that what you're going for? If you can't clearly show me
in the third act.
Yeah. Right. Like, oh, is this the shitty stuff I've been seeing? Was this the meaning of it all? That's never a good thing. So I don't think the CGI would have helped the movie at all. I think the CGI was right in line with what they thought. I mean, clearly they saw the CGI, they looked at it, and they said, yeah, this is the product we want to put out there. So they knew he was overly green, but it was almost tongue-in-cheek in a very bad way for how cartoony comic booky the Hulk looked.
He looked like he was out of a video game and placed into realistic footage,
Which is not good for CGI.
It's not a good look. An Lee was really trying, and he's on record to say, like, unfortunately, yeah, this is not a highlight of my career, and the CGI wasn't there, and I really tried to make it good, but we just didn't have it yet.
I disagree they didn't have it yet. I think it was just poor artistic design or direction. Because there are movies from that time that did have a lot better CGI and
It could
effects.
depend on the animating team. Who knows? But that brings us to the next talking point, the editing. We brought this up during plot talk because it was so jarring. There's a part I want to point out that I just think was a poor directing editing choice. It's that David and Bruce phone call when he is leaving the vague threat of Betty's life. They did a split screen between Bruce and David. So you see David explaining to Bruce in the same screen about how Betty's going to die. And I just thought that was unnecessary. It could have been a lot more engaging and powerful if you were just focused on Bruce in that scene and you had Nick Nolte's creepy voice coming through the phone off screen. If you're watching a horror slasher movie like Scream, when they're like, hello, who's there? And then the creepy voice is coming through, it's a lot more suspenseful. I just thought that was a bad directorial choice and editing choice. And all in all, I think we both give the editing and the transition gimmicks a 0 out of whatever scale you want to possibly put in front of our face.
Yeah, and to your point, you don't have to show the audience everything. I think this movie thought that they had to, where you just had to show me this one thing happening. You had to show me this other thing happening. You had to show me this other thing happening. And it was just so disjointed and jarring that I kept jumping from area to area and a cut within a cut and a picture in picture and a split screen. And I just didn't need all that. It interrupted most of the flow of the film.
Oh, it took me out of it about 17 times, but not as many times as there was
17's a low number.
as there was panels in that movie. Holy crap. Last talking point here. I'll kind of combine these two. So the 2008 Incredible Hulk, I didn't know if that was supposed to pick up where this left off because Bruce Banner is in South America at the beginning of the Incredible Hulk, but the origin stories are vastly different. So that might have just been a nod to the 03 movie because Kevin Feige was a producer on both those movies.
The main lore of the Hulk is that he's doing his best to be a loner and away from society. So it may be a nod to that. It also just is a pretty common Hulk theme. You see that even with the Avengers Hulk, right? Where he's in the jungle.
He's off in like India or something.
Yeah. So I think that's just a common Hulk thing. And he's helping people out so that no one makes him mad. I wouldn't necessarily go to a war-torn third world country to keep my blood pressure down, but
that's just you.
You're
not Bruce. You're not built different like him.
I apparently am not.
We're actually just entering phase 5 of the MCU, which has been dubbed the Multiverse Saga. It's going to end with Avengers Secret Wars, which is a big multiverse crossover event in the comics. Do you think, over, under, make your prediction now, yes or no, will Eric Bana's Bruce Banner and Hulk make an appearance in Avengers Secret Wars?
No, I think this is something Marvel has wanted to just forget about for a long time. If anything, you may see Edward Norton.
Yeah,
but the problem is Edward Norton is part of this cinematic universe already.
But they can spin it however they want. They can say they could just use him for a different universe, a different version of Bruce Banner. I think, you know what? I am also going to say no, but I'm not going to say no because Eric Bana would never do that, even though he is on record to say he's never going to play him again. Disney and Marvel have enough money to motivate anybody to come back for as little work possible and as much money possible. So I think it could happen, and it'd be insane fan service just for the meta joke of it all if they did do that. But I'm going to also predict no.
For there to be fan service, there has to be fans. And the only time they've done that was with the Spider-Mans. Tobey Maguire was a beloved figure. They did 3 separate films with him. I don't think Eric Bana, I think anybody who got into any of these movies, even who are our age, who were at the prime watching age for this Hulk movie, I don't think there's any fans of this movie. I think Eric Bana would show up on screen and these days would probably be unrecognizable and everybody would say, what? And all you're asking people to do if you bring Eric Bana into a film is you're basically saying you should go back and rewatch 2003's Hulk. And that is the last thing anybody wants someone to do, is for anyone to remember this abomination of a film.
No pun intended for the villain of The Incredible Hulk.
The abomination.
You said there's no fans of this film, and I won't necessarily disagree with that, because we're going to get into the ratings. We're going to wrap up this review. We're going to give it our ratings, and we will run through other people's ratings. Let's start with Rotten Tomatoes, the ratio, the percentage. How many critics like this and how many audience members like this? The critics, shockingly, have it as a fresh tomato at 62%. 62% of critics thought this was a good movie. 29% of the audience thought this was a good movie. It's usually the other way around.
Right.
So I'm kind of surprised at that. Going back to what we started out Plot Talk with deviations from the comics, there's not a quicker way to disassociate the fans and their investment in this movie by not sticking to the canon and not sticking to the lore. So as soon as they start going rogue on the story and make their own creative choices, then you kind of lose your core audience, because we're talking early 2000s Marvel movies. These are not popular. These are a gamble.
They're kind of a novelty.
You got to stick to the source material, because your audience is going to be predominantly nerds. And if you don't stay loyal, they will react.
I think the 62 from critics is, we're new to this comic book genre, so they watch it and they go, oh, okay. You know how Rotten Tomatoes meter works. It's either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And clearly enough people said, yeah, this is fine.
An Lee said that he wanted to make this more of a psychodrama as opposed to a superhero movie. There's not a lot of Hulk in this movie. There's definitely a lot of slow, dragged out scenes between characters talking, so I won't necessarily disagree with that.
Well, that kind of goes back to your question about would the CGI make it better? Not really. The Hulk wasn't on screen that much. It was just a cherry on top of the shit sundae that this movie was.
A moldy green cherry. Metacritic gives us a 54 score out of 100. The Metacritic audience gives it a 5.3. IMDb, the wild card, gives it a 5.6. So pretty consistent across the board that this was not stellar. If I had to pretend I was a producer on this movie, not Kevin Feige, I have too much respect for him, but somebody else, some sleazebag. Let's say this is in 2001. This would be my pitch. Let's update the Hulk IP with today's cutting-edge technology. Imagine Spy Kids CGI technology telling a classic Hulk story. But it's really melancholy and dragged out.
Surprised it's a psychodrama. I basically said, somebody said, imagine it's the Hulk IP, but it's not the Hulk.
Universal, book it. Greenlight it. Here we go. That log line in the beginning, you said it was pretty on course for the canon of Hulk. I have my own log line, an honest one, after watching this movie.
Yeah, I want you to give your log line and your popcorn points, please.
Okay, I am very much looking forward to your popcorn points because you came out the gates hot, but I will give mine first. I believe you gave yours first last week, so I will give mine first this week.
So it is time, for my friend, for the final review.
Final review. Fight.
Here we go. Here's my honest logline for Hulk 2003. After a scientist injects a genetic altering formula of his own creation, disobeying direct military orders, he passes on his genetic deformity to his son, which then leads him to try and murder his toddler son, but instead kills his wife. And then 30 years later, that same scientist seeks out to absorb his son's powers, which turn him into a smooth green behemoth, or Grenemoth, when he is angry. What can go wrong? 4.9 popcorn points.
Wow.
It gets a 4.9 because it had to be better than Stealth. I just didn't like that movie. And I don't want to compare movie to movies, but I do want some sort of continuity and consistency within my own personal rating system. I'll just go into my general thoughts here to expand upon why I gave it a 4.9. I was really middle of the road here. I was fluctuating between a 6 and a 4. I really think there could have been something here. An Lee calls this movie a psychodrama. The actors at the time were promoting the film. They kept referring to it as a drama, not a hero movie. So, you got childhood trauma and repressed memories. It's really heavy stuff when you read it on paper and not watching the film, which is just a cartoonish disaster. But there's a recent Marvel show that explored this idea of repressed memories and childhood trauma and how it can be successfully integrated into a comic book hero story. And that would be the show Moon Knight, with Oscar Isaac Hernandez Estrada, most commonly known as Oscar Isaac. It did an excellent job unfolding the mystery of the past and drawing out emotional reaction from the audience from Oscar's performance. So we know it could be done. With this movie, if that was their goal, missed the mark.
Big time.
Hulk he's the poster child for the tragic hero. The biggest curse imaginable within his personality. You have the duality there, and I just feel like they didn't explore that well.
No.
They didn't utilize the core Hulk conflict to the best of their abilities. We talked about this before. The other big thing is, if you're going to deviate from the comics, you better not miss. David is the one who genetically deforms his son. It should have been Bruce doing it to himself. The other thing is when he's saying, oh, I liked being the Hulk, we touched upon it earlier. He's not supposed to like it. The Hulk and Bruce Banner don't like each other. There's a duality there. There's conflicting personalities within the same body. And that's the core conflict in the Hulk storyline, and they didn't even utilize that. It's such a compelling story point to be told.
Even if he did like it, they could have expanded on it. That's the only time he mentions how he feels towards the Hulk.
They could have fixed that with one line change. Instead of saying, I like it, he could have said, he likes it. It would have given it at least one more point from me, because then at least you're sticking to the original Hulk origin and canon. At the end of the day, I think a great story could have been told, but instead it's a colorful display with dizzying editing and gimmicky transitions, resulting in an overall bland execution. I got no emotional reaction from any of the performances. Eric Bana and his performance of Bruce, I thought he was an okay Bruce Banner. Like, he was kind of dopey and fit the mold pretty well. But I never cried. The only time I laughed was laughing at the movie. But I wasn't
Glenn's
invested. Glenn's death was the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
If anything, I think Jennifer Connelly was a really good Betty Ross. I think she's a better
Liv
Betty
Tyler.
Ross than Liv Tyler.
Yeah.
In The Incredible Hulk.
It was cast well. That's the only thing I had going for it.
Yeah. No, Sam Elliott was an excellent General Ross. He can give William Hurt a run for his money in the MCU. Yeah, I had no emotional reaction to it, and that lands within that 5 to 6 range. But I gave it a 4.9 just because it wasn't that good.
That's fair.
It could have been good, but it wasn't.
It does suck that it was cast well, but the movie was so bad that you couldn't salvage any of the actors from it.
No.
Like, you just had to completely let it go and move on. My log line, it's not even really a log line, but this is the best I could come up with. So I said, do you like the Hulk? Well, fuck you. The Hulk is now a frogman and his dad is the weather. 1.2 popcorns.
Oh my God.
It's bad. I'm sorry. This movie is so bad. What makes it worse is you had source material. You had source material. All you had to do was not fuck it up. You had to not fuck it up. And that you did. You did. The most important thing for a hero is their origin story. And you fucked it. You didn't do the origin story. There were so many plot holes. There's so many plot holes that nothing about it made sense. It was so disjointed. The writing was terrible. The editing was jarring. The CGI was crap. No character developed over the course of the movie. If someone could name me, the general never learned a lesson. Betty is still the same person Betty always was. Even Bruce Banner was... I don't even know how he ended up. He was just always this scared, confused guy who turned into the Hulk. He never accepted it. He never was like, I'm leaning into this. like you said, I have this duality about it. Nope, he was confused the whole fucking movie. Think about it. I want you to think about this. He turned into the Hulk. He was frightened. He's like, I don't know what's happening, but he likes it. Then he gets shot in the leg, tranquilized. Then he gets thrown into a water tank. He wakes up in a room locked with Glenn, gets basically tased till he's knocked out. Dude still has no idea what's going on. He's thrown in a water tank. From there, he turns into the Hulk, fights the military, gets thrown up into space, passes out, travels through the sewer, sees Betty. They basically then they capture him, and then the next time we see him, his dad is biting a cord and turning into a giant electric man. From the time he turned into the Hulk, we never saw Bruce Banner ever again develop. Period.
I think the Hulk had more character development than Bruce, and he was not on screen that much.
He did. His dad was always an insane person. No character developed. And again, there's so much fucking source material. Thank God that the current Marvel series and Marvel movies and Marvel universe draws from source material and uses it correctly. I don't know who this movie was for. If you wanted to do a psycho thriller, don't do it under the guise of Hulk. I hate that. I hate that shit. If you have a good idea for a movie, make it your own movie. Make it a dude who gets genetically experimented on by his dad, and make it your own psycho thriller where the dad becomes Weather. I don't know. This is a 1.2, and honestly, the cast is the only thing that makes it at least over a 1. With a worse cast, this is a 0.7. Any day of the week. This is an awful movie. Just bottom of the barrel. There's a reason that Marvel has fucking buried this thing. They brought all the Tobey Maguires back. They still have Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman's coming back in Deadpool. I mean, this movie, if you asked any Marvel executive, what do you think about 2003 Hulk? They might throw you into a fucking pit in the basement to say, don't you ever bring that movie up again. That is how piss poor this film is. I don't think I've ever seen a movie I've disliked more than this film.
Wait, was this your first watch of this?
I watched it when I was 12. Like, I saw it when it first came out, and I was like, I don't know. I wasn't able to appreciate how shitty this. I knew it was bad. I didn't know how bad. This is bad. The last movie I had at this rate, Stealth was a 2.7. I would watch Stealth every day of the week over this film. Every day of the week. If aliens came and visited this planet and said, you either have to show me Stealth or Hulk, I'd say, please watch Stealth. Because if you saw Hulk, you would fucking incinerate this blue marble we are all on. I hate this movie. I hate it.
Okay, so Nick didn't like this movie at all. This is a bigger split than Stealth, but this still results as our lowest rated movie.
Deservedly so.
Just going back in time here, you gave Stealth a 2.7. I gave it a 4.1. I actually buffed up the score here. I gave Hulk a 4.9. But your 1.2, boy howdy, does that drive the average down to a 3.05. Which means this movie, the JPI score, the Just Play It score, this is a bag of kernels, which is fueled by Nick's burnt popcorn. Right?
I am shocked that the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is a 29. I am shocked that the critics is a 62 and that Metascore, IMDb, all these folks have it in the 5s. I don't know. I'm getting viscerally angry and I need to stop.
You are not going to like Nick when he is angry. And I think that's a great time to wrap up this review of 2003's Simply Hulk. The movie we're watching next week is probably a movie you have literally never heard about.
My hint is that it is a early work from the beautiful Scarlett Johansson.
We'll see you then. Thank you so much for listening.